Hello everyone, we will be starting our session in a few minutes. Please relax, get a virtual seat, introduce yourself on the chat, and we will start in very Hello everyone, let's just start. I'm gonna be removing thanks for the reception. We will be first removing the video, which today has been a little bit of a complication. So let me figure out how can again remove the video, maybe hide it from the stage. Yes, correct. Okay, let me then proceed with this traditional thing about sharing screen. Okay, here we are. Let's begin again. Thanks everyone for joining us. Welcome to this Axis session on software, security software, and feedback loops. My name is Jean-François Queralt. I go by John, makes everybody's life easier. With me, we have Rashi Saxena, who is the project officer at the IO Foundation for the Axis project. The Axis project is done in collaboration with Internews and Usable Tools, and it's been running for the past 3 months, with the exception of last month where we had a hiatus. And today will be our last day. Introducing a little bit the organization. The IO Foundation is an NGO, a global NGO advocating for data-centric digital rights, which in a very, very succinct way, and actually it's not a, we still do not have a perfect definition because it's a rather new advocacy, and therefore we're still struggling on putting the right words into it. Essentially would be an attempt on encouraging governments so that anytime that they issue a policy that has to do with public consumption technology, specifically public consumption software, that we would come not only as in the form of a policy with pretty words, it should also come with a technical standard for implementation. The idea being that if under a specific jurisdiction, you have a number of regulations that are protecting you, these would be implemented, embedded into the technology itself, transparently for the citizen, transparently for the final user, which shouldn't be bothered about any of these things. And so as a result of that, what we identified was that programmers are for us the next generation of rights defenders. And we started running these TechUp monthly events under the premise of thinking in what kind of world do these programmers want to code? What is exactly the kind of planet that they want to live into, but also what are the kind of digital domains that they want to architect and to implement. And as a result, we figured it out that we identify them as the next generation of human and digital rights defenders. We essentially run this project, this TechUp, on a monthly basis for them. Although not exclusively expecting them to come and meet us, we want them to be able to interact with lawyers, policymakers, UX, UI designers, and so forth. We want them to start developing a certain sense of responsibility by interacting at large with the users of the tools that they put together, and also being able to examine a little bit better what are the consequences and the outcomes of the use of that software. And this is pretty much what informs the training that we've been doing in these past 3 months. We've been looking into digital security tools, and a number of them that we will be listing now, and also what's called feedback loops. A feedback loop, what it really means is a way for the user to be able to provide a meaningful feedback to the programmers, which is not as common as one may think, so that they can implement, they can not only fix bugs and implement features, but also make sure that it's serving the actual usage of their own stakeholders, of their own beneficiaries. The objectives of the training have been to introduce each one of you to a number of tools, to see exactly how they correlate, how they work with each other at the same time, and also to obtain feedback from you in terms of what could be done better in those tools, and to provide that connection with the developers. In the previous months, we've been very happy to have the presence of a representative, to the very least, of each one of the tools that we're going to be reviewing today. It's been really great working with them, and we will hope to provide them with some meaningful feedback in the coming days after a certain amount of activities that we'll be describing later on today in the session. And with that, we hope they're going to be building and implementing and improving those tools. The agenda, apologies for that. The agenda for today will be to quickly review each of one of these tools. We were able to look much more in depth the tools in day 1 and in day 2. And for today, we're going to be doing a very quick review of them, and we will be reviewing as well with you, exposing you what's going to be the methodology for the feedback. We thought about a number of possibilities, and the traditional ones of having people fill up forms in during the session would be extremely boring. And we we'll try to put something different together that is going to happen outside of this session. We'll be explaining you a little bit more as we move forward. Please remember that we used to have office hours that were dedicated for this project between April to June. Now we are out of that particular segment. However, you will still have access to our office hours on a general basis, so no more dedicated sessions for you guys, but we're still going to be available for you all the way to the 20th of December. We will be providing you with a link, so if you have any questions or any doubts that you will have with this particular applications, or any other element that has to do with digital security or digital rights, whatever that you require to clarify, you can reach out to us, select, book one of the office hours, and we'll be more than happy to give you a hand with it. So before we move forward into the tools themselves, I want to review a little bit what is the architecture, if you will, of the advocacy itself and how it correlates with the use of the tools that we're going to be exposing. So how does this all get together? If we analyze the history of human rights, you can see here in this very simplistic diagram that on the top left, if you will, I'm not 100% sure how you guys can see it, but in the screen that represents my slide, on the top left, you will see that there's a person. And when we analyze what has been the trajectory of the human rights movement, one of the smartest thing that sounds obvious, but it wasn't necessarily obvious, one of the smartest things that they did was to realize that human rights were about humans. And therefore, the whole conversation and the whole strategy revolved around identifying what humans would require and what kind of personal harms humans could go through. And then from that understanding, from that list of human harms, being able to infer the human rights that were necessary to try to proactively avoid those personal harms. Now, once you have that list, which again revolve into protecting people, you will have a number of organizations, whether they are international or supranational, that develop a number of duties of care, typically through the shape of constitutional law or some international treaties. And these stakeholders will be in charge of making sure to implement these rights and to provide the infrastructure required for those rights to be possible. Now, when we look into technology, which is exactly the domain that we are looking into when it comes to data center digital rights, but also the space in which TechUp is moving, the center of the conversation is not people anymore. It's actually data. In other words, the data that represents that people, fair enough, still, however, data. The nature of what you're trying to represent, or what you're trying to preserve, is data, not people. And therefore, the same analysis that you were doing before in terms of what are the personal harms that can be inflicted upon people, you repeat that same question, what are the digital harms that can be inflicted upon data? And once you look into that, you obtain a taxonomy that is now relatable to technologists. And based on that taxonomy, they can then establish what are the digital rights that you want to implement and you want to define so that you prevent those digital harms from happening in as much as possible. And the same happens once you have those documents, which typically should be translated into a technical standard in order for programmers, technologies at large to understand exactly what is expected of them. Then you can move that into, again, the same system of having a regulation, a technical standard of implementation, and a number of stakeholders, a number of organizations, whether they are national or supranational, that are going to be taking care of implementing them through duties of care, de-risking, et cetera, et cetera. But as you can see, there is a very interesting parallelism. So you try to protect people for human rights, you try to protect data for digital rights. And by following exactly the same procedure, you can not only align the people who are policymakers and lawyers when it comes to human rights, you can also align the technologies when it comes to protect the data that represents those people. This single slide, I could talk about this one for about easily 2 hours, because you can unpack all of these concepts in a very interesting way. You can even see more what are the consequences and what would be the potential impacts when it comes to regulation. And some of them are going to be actually discussed in the next minutes. So when we were looking into how we're going to be building this understanding of digital rights from a technical perspective, we realized that we needed to provide a number of guiding principles, that kind of small, easy memo techniques that would stay in your mind when you are implementing something that shape the way that you are seeing things and the way that you're operating, just to make sure that you're always evaluating things on a same pattern. So the first, and of course, everyone is very much of a fan of generating principles here, principles there, principles all over the place, and they become a little bit cumbersome. So we really wanted to keep the list as short as possible. The shorter the better, and very concentrated on specific objectives. Nothing too vague, and specifically nothing that would be not implementable. The first one is, I am my data. What it really means is that I have to understand that the data that is out there that represents me is not separated from me. It is me. And you can make very much easily the case, because no data has value unless it's fully contextualized. If I tell you number five doesn't mean anything. You require for me to explain you what is it that I'm measuring to a certain degree of what's the English, of detail, in order for that piece of data, for that data point to have any value whatsoever. But the moment that you do that, you're attaching that particular piece of data, that data point, to the source entity that generated it, the source entity that provides that context. Now, there is a very interesting consequence if we accept that we are our data, and it's the fact that, well, if I am my data, and my data is an extension of myself, just as my arm is an extension of my own body or my own person, constitutional law, traditionally for those jurisdictions where a constitution is in place, already protects me. And it protects my head, my limbs, my heart and lungs, my personality. It protects everything on my own. There is no separation. It doesn't say everything is covered except my nails, for instance. And so anything that is part of myself is covered by that constitutional law. Should the data not be covered too? And if that was the case, did we even need data protection laws to begin with? We don't have a clear answer to that question yet. We suspect that there's something there to be investigated, and that the consequences from a legal perspective will be quite substantial if we are to assume that we are our data. Think about it. If I can manipulate you and your behavior through your data, would you really want that information to be in the hands of people who are going to be misusing it? And if I'm able to replicate your behavior online through the use of data that profiles you, how is a judge going to be making sure that it was you, or a substitute of you, or a replica of you, behaving exactly the same way you would have personally should you have been in front of the computer and, say, attempted to hack a certain online bank? That's going to have a lot of consequences, and there's going to be huge debate to be had as to how we're going to be handling this. Now, principle 2 is end remedy. Is the idea that, well, if I'm doing an application, if I'm architecting software, I would like to avoid problems to begin with, and not necessarily allow people to go into remedial systems. So let's put it that way. I'm happy to have an insurance that in case someone hits me from the back, I ride a motorbike, so if a car hits me from the back and I end up in the hospital, for as long as both parties are insured, you will get, pass me the expression, but in an ideal world, you will have your bill paid by the insurance of the other person without you having to worry about it. That's what you call a remedial system. Now, on an ideal situation, I would prefer not to have the accident to begin with. I don't want to spend time in the hospital, and I don't want to be getting into troubles with whether the payment is done or not. I want the accident not to happen. So you can, if you can think about ways to avoid the grievance, and that is your attitude every time that you are architecting a system, it becomes a much more robust and much more protected system. And the third one is rise by design, where the idea is very, very simple. If there is a specific right, regulation, a policy that affects on a specific jurisdiction, and I am covered by that jurisdiction, I am to obey and abide as a citizen to that jurisdiction, and so does companies, and so does telecom companies, and so does service providers, and so forth. Why are those regulations not implemented transparently in the infrastructure itself? Any single policy should be coded transparently in the technology, so that I don't have to concern myself when I request Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, which other big company to delete my data because I don't want to operate with them anymore. I should have the technical reassurance that the data has been deleted, not just wondering, well, if it didn't happen, then I can go to remedy system. I can always go and sue them. Almost nobody has the money, the time, nor the resources to sue a big company. Now, when we are looking into the software, there's a word of caution. We're going to be moving now into analyzing a little bit more the pieces of software that are today's subject of our session. Where do you obtain the source for that software matters in a lot. Always make sure, to the best of your abilities, to download the software that you're going to be installing in your devices, and specifically this kind of software that we're going to be discussing today, from the official sources. It's not always straightforward to do so. All right, we've been conducting tests in the past where trying to obtain space through web search applications such as Siphon, for instance, which we're going to be looking in today, will result into a lot of fake links. And one can only imagine the kind of actual software that you are installing. Very likely a modified version of Siphon that will be extracting data and doing anything except protecting you. Make sure to always go to the official websites if possible. Try to avoid peer-to-peer downloads for this kind of software. You know, you want to download a movie, I'm not going to be the one judging you. Don't download this kind of software through those networks. That's definitely the last place that you want. At least not right now as things stand. In the future, there may be ways for you to protect yourself and to make sure that you are downloading an authentic version. At the moment, we're still a little bit far from that. So for now, stay away from those networks when it comes to peer-to-peer networks, when it comes to obtaining this piece of software. Sometimes that might be the only option that you have, depending on which jurisdictions you are and what are the restrictions imposed by certain governments. So this is not always a clear-cut situation. However, if you're going to be deleting it, try to get in touch with people that you know are already using it, and they might be able to tell you, listen, this source here, this source there. It's always be very cautious about what is that you're installing, unless you have a certain degree of reassurance, and that reassurance should never be below 99%, that you are getting the official version of it. Otherwise, you might just be exposing yourself and do just the opposite of what you were expecting or what you were planning. Now that we are done with the word of warning, let's go into the tools and verify and look into which is that we're going to be looking. So if you look at this diagram, it's quite telling. Between a person that you can see on the top left and their own digital representation, or otherwise as well, their digital twin, which can also be represented or understood as their online credentials. So typically you have a username and a password, and that would allow you to access a number of digital assets, whether it is files, whether it is your bank account, whatever it is. But you will be identifying yourself against a service, against a provider. And keeping that information, that identification, is just as critical as it would be to make sure that your house key does not fall into the wrong hands. There's been a number of wrong practices or historically derived practices that were not the most efficient. And nowadays we have tools to prevent that. We have tools to be able to store our credentials and to make sure that they are different between them so that we don't reuse passwords, etc., etc. And KeepIceXC is going to be helping us with that. Essentially, KeepIceXC is the way for us to be securely connected with our digital selves. Now, when we are moving around, we might be wanting to connect between different digital selves, between our digital self and somebody else's. So basically, you would call that instant messaging. There's a number of applications out there, and it's not as if instant messaging is anything that is new. However, Briar has the piece of software that we'll be reviewing today has some very interesting features, and specifically does not necessarily require to be connected to the internet in order to be able to send and receive messages. In fact, it's a very good option in case of internet shutdowns. It is also a very good option in terms of natural disasters, for instance, where telecom facilities can just vanish, whether intentionally or unintentionally. It also has the capacity, as we will see, that if you receive a message that was intended to be broadcast, you can carry it around, and once you get into the reach of, based on the capacity of your phone, of course, once it gets into the reach of other people who might be the receptors or the recipients of those messages, it will be automatically downloaded to them. And so you can function as a relay, and everything is a little bit more resilient in terms of network accessibility. The next part is Siphon. Siphon is this red P that you see over there. Siphon acts as a VPN. And the idea here is that once you connect with your digital twin, you may want to consult information online. Now, Siphon, what it does is it helps you masquerading where you are, sometimes who you are, and allow for a certain degree of anonymity, typically a very good degree, although there are ways to increase it. And finally, there is ONI, which is a monitor system. If we are communicating between digital entities, if we are looking into information online through with the use of Siphon, sometimes what we need to do is to evaluate the status of that network where we are connected. And make no mistake, we are very much used to think about that as the internet, but it would be great if we start changing a little bit the language that we use and maybe call it digital spaces, digital domains, digital realms, whatever we prefer. We can find a consensus on that. Let's just remember that internet is just one network. There's plenty of networks out there. Some of them are public, some of them are private, some of them are confidential. And any number of them can have data of yours, with or without your knowledge and with or without your consent. So every time that you look at a document that says your internet, your rights on the internet, that should ring a bell that something might be missing there, because it's not about the data, the rights of your data on the internet. It's the rights of your data no matter what it is. So what ONI helps you to do is to try to verify or to run tests in order to check whether that particular segment of the network where you are connected is being interfered, if there has been any shutdown applied typically by governments, whether there is any censorship happening, and so forth. ONI has two tools, ONI Probe and ONI Explorer, and both, one basically serves in order to be able to test the network, and the other one to make readings in the status of the network. So again, very, very quick summary. KeePassXC to store your passwords in a safe manner, the access to your digital identities. Briar to communicate between people in a secure way and not always depending on the internet. Siphon in order to be able to browse information online without protecting your identity and making sure that you're going to be able to access information that may otherwise have been curtailed for you, and only to be able to verify whether the network is functioning properly or is there any type of censorship or interference happening. Now, part of the project was the idea of providing these feedback loops, as in basically providing the communication, the feedback through a system that would integrate into the flow of the programmer. So what we want is to fill up the gap a little bit between what happens and what is the experience of the programming teams, but also the experience of the final user, which typically is very disconnected. And there are reasons for that, because the final user does not always need or require, and shouldn't in fact be, as a technical person, to know how to proceed with those things. However, programmers do have the same problem. They will not be able to adapt the software specifically for the needs of the final user if they don't get to have that feedback back. And so we have devised a system to using GitHub to be able to integrate into their programming flow all of that feedback from the users. Unfortunately, we have been unable to proceed with the implementation. That's on us. There's been a number of reasons why that hasn't been possible, but we remain dedicated on getting it done eventually. So that's something that we'll be publishing in our GitHub space sooner or later. So how would this have worked? Well, the idea would have been to provide a number of libraries, a number of methods for the developers to be able to integrate it directly into the application. So what typically happens is, if you find that there's a problem or you want to contact support, write an email to this address. Well, that's not very conducive as an end user, as a citizen, because I'm in front of my phone, for instance, or in front of my desktop, and I'm interacting with the platform already, and I'm doing the action on the spot. And having to go to another application which is separate from that environment and start typing an email address and then thinking about a subject and then try to describe every single one of the steps, which it's not always easy to describe, but also we might not be responding exactly to the needs that the developer team may have, or we go totally overboard, giving information that is not necessarily required, etc., etc., etc. Finding the right spot is very, very difficult. The sweet spot is extremely difficult to find. And so our idea was to be able to integrate that directly into the application so that the use and the feedback would be based on the interaction of the user with the application itself. And by that token, being able to send that feedback directly into the repository where the developer team is collaborating in order to launch the next version and to fix the bugs, but also in an attempt of trying to curtailing that scalability. So if you think about it, right now you have a dry well. I'm not sure how you express this in English. There's very little amount of feedback, let's say, for a specific team, and then you open the floodgates, and there's a huge way and a very simple way for users, for citizens, to send feedback to the developers. Developers can get extremely overwhelmed with this, and a lot of time, specifically if it's a bug, you're going to have 15 people, 20, 100, 200 trying to notify the same bug, expressed in different ways. And there has to be someone who goes through all of those tickets and make sure whether this one is related to that one, if it's the same one, what it looks like. And when you have 5 of them, yeah, you can spend 10 minutes to get it done. But you have 100 of them, that becomes a daunting task. So there has to be a way to avoid that flooding, to actually draw the developers and to make it so that it really enters seamlessly into their development process so that they can be informed and at the same time not overwhelmed, and then be productive to release a new version that is going to have those bugs and possibly those request features implemented. The way we looked into it was specifically being able to create the tickets directly through GitHub, and we wanted to have that demo is the demo that I'm mentioning we have failed to be able to produce for, again, reasons that are a little bit too long to explain, but we remain committed to get it done. And so you would have this loop between the developers publishing a version, the users being able to use that version, getting the feedback, pass it back into the developers, and creating that feedback loop that would connect closely what the developers are doing and the users. I think most of the time users don't even think about the fact that there's a developer behind because they can't see it. And how often is it that you think, well, why would I want to bother to send a feedback about something if no one's going to be listening to? That element of interaction is also very important for the user. And so being able to do it through GitHub also had the advantage that the user could receive updates about whether their specific request has already been attended or is in the process of being attended. And so they can see that there is an actual response to the efforts and the time they have been spending on providing that feedback. We feel that that is extremely valuable, and that it will really help to not only make users more conscious about how difficult and complex it is to build good software, it really is, and as well, developers to understand and feel a little bit closer to the stakeholders that they try to serve. It's not always the most straightforward of the situations. Now, reaching this particular point, I'm going to be passing the stage to Rashi, who is going to be doing the demos for each of one of the applications, and I will be back with you after she is done. Rashi, all yours. Rashi, we cannot hear you. I hope that you are not having any technical difficulties. Typically, these kind of awkward silences do not bode well. Rashi? Let's just give her a few seconds. I'm going to try to reach out to her. Well, there has to be some problem with the microphone because she is with us, but we cannot hear her. Let me see. She is likely going to have a problem with the source of her microphone. Can you hear us, Rashi? Can you type on the chat, Rashi? See if we can. Yeah, Rashi, Eric is recommending you to refresh the page. Yes, we can hear you, Rashi. I can receive your messages through Telegram, and I can hear you properly. All right, let's see if that works. We never had this problem before in the previous session, so I hope this is not going to be stopping us too much. Well, this kind of stuff happens anyway. And
I'm back. Can you hear me now? Please tell me you
yes,
can hear me.
now it works.
Is it? Am I audible, or does it need to be louder or not louder? Is it okay?
You're totally good.
Okay, so I just had one request. If you could share the slides for me, I think that will make it easier for me, and I can share my screen only during demos because it's so faint. If that's okay with you.
Sure. The problem here is that if you're going to be sharing the screen, we're going to be switching from one to another. We cannot be sharing at the same time. So I might as well just.
That's totally fine with me. But I mean, you can just. I'm going to talk about KeePass a little time and then just directly go with the demo. So if you can just share that screen, that would be great.
All right.
Thanks, John. So yeah,
I will follow your. I will follow your lead. You tell me when you want me to stop sharing and when you want me to go to the next slide, if ever.
That works great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much, and apologies for the glitch. So yeah, with KeePass, I think it's we all have, and John keeps talking about digital identities. We have so many different digital identities, and I was just kind of reflecting in the morning that I perhaps have, I think, around 30 or 40 of them, and it becomes such a pain to remember all your passwords, and a lot of people tend to log in from steady platforms that we use like Gmail or Facebook, but one of the on the downsides of that could be that if you are using the same password for every platform that you log into, and if it gets hacked, and I can talk from an Indian perspective, when you have security breaches, things can really, really go down south for you, and who knows what can happen. So yeah, KeePass is basically where we get to you'll get to learn a little more about how you can secure your password using a password manager that is secure and offline. So it It's something that you can download and store on your computer, and it's not. I don't think it's very dependent on memory, but yeah, it does of course depend on the hardware that you use. And ideally, you would not want to save your database on a desktop that is easily accessible and can be found by anyone else who's accessing your desktop or your laptop or whatever. And for this training purposes, we would be talking specifically about the desktop versions, although I'm sure there might be a lot of other versions that can be used, which you can also check. And there's also KeePass, which has slightly different interfaces, but we would be using KeePass X, which is a little more sophisticated and a little better. So yeah, the layout's a little different, and it also helps you to manage your own security online, and as I mentioned, stores your credentials, and which is typically composed of pieces of information, which is usually your username and passwords. So yeah, the maybe John, if you have some instances of talking about how you want to talk about reusing or recycling the same passwords and kind of storing them in different web browsers. But yeah, storing also, yeah, just a heads up, please never store your passwords in web browsers. That is not great information, especially if you're using Google. So yeah, I can go ahead with. I think I can go ahead with the demo, or I need to talk a little bit more. So yeah, so what it does is you can also generate unique logins in an account with, in encrypted databases. And yeah, and also don't ever use plain text. A lot of people sometimes use just like something as simple as password or 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Ideally, you should use it. Ideally, it should be a combination of different characters. And it also, I think, one thing to keep in mind is that with the flexibility that KeePass sort of provides, you can really store long characters compared to 7 or 8 that you usually find with different platforms. But you should also be able to sort of identify the requirements of each platform that you have. Like, for example, with banks, banks are very, very particular about having one uppercase, one lowercase, along with a few characters. And they also don't allow you to copy and paste. One of the things that KeePass also provides is that you can directly copy or paste if you're using Twitter, or if you're using Facebook, or if you're using perhaps PayPal. But I think especially with Indian banks, don't think it is allowed. So in those cases, what you would typically want to do is just type out the 30, 35, 40 characters. But yeah, but still, I think the advantage of using this is that you just need to use one, or just need to perhaps remember one key password and nothing else. And everything else is stored, identified, labeled really neatly and well in this particular database. And yeah, so if you do have any extra questions, I would be only providing a little demo. And of course, if you have extra questions, we would also be sending you the recordings that we had at the first session, and you also have the office hour to find out more. So you can also, for example, I wouldn't be covering groups, because groups is basically where you can share and data of together that you use, perhaps if you work in an IT company, and there are joint passwords, or with that a lot of teams need to use things like that. So yeah, it goes. I think one thing is that the amount of flexibility that you have is great, and also when I say you can use a minimum of 32 characters, it just makes the encryption more difficult to be able to be broken or to be able to be guessed. So yeah, that's a little bit, but I think I can go ahead with the demo. So John, you can stop sharing your screen. Thanks so much. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Not yet. Okay. I'm just going to first open up KeePass. Okay, hang on. I'm just give me a minute. I'm going to be back in a minute. I'm just going to.
I'll take the chance, since Rashi is still looking into sharing for KeePass. Opinion of LastPass. The opinion of LastPass, we're going to give in a very personal one. I wouldn't say an official one from the organization, but there is pros and cons to use systems that may be in the cloud, as it is with LastPass, versus systems from like the one that we're going to be showing you, like a KeePass XC, which is, by the way, a variant of another application called KeePass. That's the original one, which, for being open source, has allowed other teams to implement their own version and what they thought was the best way to approach the problem that they're trying to solve, to store data, credential data security. Now, it's always the very difficult dichotomy between comfort and versus security. LastPass is a cloud-based password manager that makes it easy for people to have access to their passwords wherever they are. They don't need to worry as to where the information is stored. They don't have to worry about whether they're going to be having access or not to it, because for as long as they have a browser and internet access, you're good to go. However, if you think about it, if you don't have internet access, you can be actually in trouble. So that's already a con. Now, the problem is in here is, let's think about for a minute username and passwords. Let's think about, I'm going to put my camera on because otherwise it feels like I'm having strange stuff. So I'm actually thinking how to express this better. When you have a house, you have your own keys for the house, and you want to have a copy of those keys just in case you lose your keys, your own, or you left them at the office, and the office happens to be 20 kilometers away from your place, and so if you don't get a copy, you're going to be sleeping on the street. You would give a copy of your keys as a backup to people that you know and you trust. It's not unheard of. You will just not give it to just about anyone. So the question is here is, why would I want to store my passwords in a server with people that I don't know and that I cannot 100% be sure that they're going to be treating them properly and safely enough? This is not to doubt everybody, okay? It's just a matter of, there is a huge importance here. And we have to understand that our digital identities are very critical in not only impersonating us. I mean, people tend to think that it's all about whether someone can access to your account and siphon them out. Sometimes what you will have is access to shared accounts. Let's say, for instance, that you work for a company and you are responsible for the social media accounts, and there's 5 or 6 social media operators that are basically taking care of that. And someone steals your credentials and impersonates you and starts create havoc across the social media accounts. That can have very direct consequences. And so in the same spirit that we are very, very careful with our physical keys, we have to be just equally careful with the digital ones. And I, for one, personally prefer to store them myself in my personal storage areas, controlling how that is done, and making sure that no one else has access to it. Now, of course, that requires a certain degree of technical capacity that should be removed over time. And I'm hoping that as we move forward in time with these kind of solutions, that we will have something similar to LastPass that will be self-hosted. This is the kind of tools that you should host yourself. And I would never give access or store it in. I mean, you can use, for instance, Google Drive to store it, but just the database, not the access. Make sure to use it as a service provider, but make sure that the actual application that is handling them is on you, and that you have control to it. I've never used LastPass, and I would prefer never to use it. But that's a personal opinion.
But John, I wanted to also, I had a question. If you're talking about storing it on Drive, doesn't Google archive everything? And how would that be secure? If you are storing it on Drive?
Well, that's the idea. When the whole database itself requires to have a master password.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
We are here in one of those chicken and egg type of situations. As in, you want to have a database of passwords that requires to be protected by a password that needs to be as complex as possible. And so you need to store that complexity somewhere. Where are you keeping it? Because if you try to just have it on your head, not going to work. I can tell you, you're not going to be wanting to remember more than a password of, say, 15, 16 characters. And it's typically going to be something that is going to be very easy for you to remember. And as a result, more often than not, it's going to be easy for others to guess. And what's going to be the alternative? Put it on the piece of paper?
No.
As in, it really is a complicated process. And so there are methods that you can use where you can distribute the way you access to that database. So for instance, it's a combination of biometrics or password and maybe a file that is also used to encrypt the information. But we're not going to get into those details today because we don't have the time. Anyone who wants to learn more about this, please go and check on the office hours. We're more than happy to do. We actually reviewed some of it during the previous sessions, but those sessions we had way more time to actually do a whole demo of all the features. Yeah. In essence, I would be very, very worried. And you can protect your database, answering your question. You just have to be very careful about it. I want to also pick up, before I pass back to you, I want to pick up on the question that Jan is putting on the Q&A. As the cost, yes, that's another element. We are not only discussing here products that are open source and free to use, which, by the way, the fact that they are free to use doesn't mean that it doesn't cost time, energy, and resources to the developers. Normally, open source developers are more than happy to contribute with technology to the well-being of people. It would be great if every now and then, if you can spare $5 and send it to them, even if it was for a cafe, that's already a really nice gesture. Okay. There's sometimes other licensings. There was this very interesting licenses, postcardware, where basically the developers will grant you with a license just by sending them a postcard, because what they want is to see that they have an actual impact on people, that people are actually using it, and they would like to hear that feedback from others. Definitely, premium versions are costly, as Jan is mentioning. And there's another element, which is how captive we end up being of those platforms. And if they decide to raise the cost, you don't have a solution, and you basically become captive to them. I will be very, very concerned to be held hostage with that kind of information, with that kind of credentials by a third-party organization that, on top of that, you never know it's going to crash. I mean, we're not even talking about the security measures that they may be implementing or not. I mean, there's no question that they can be very good or they can be very bad. It's just a matter of reputation. It's a matter of how much money they have to invest in security. And also think about the fact that if one single company is hosting the information of 100,000 people, that is a much more likely target for hackers to try to enter and to break, because they will have access in the return over investment by trying to hack that particular point is way higher than trying to figure out who is using password protections and maybe storing the information on Google Drive. Because first you need to break Google Drive, then you need to identify the file. You can actually put it into names that are going to be easy to identify. They have to browse, etc., etc. So it's not a straightforward procedure. And definitely the cost can be a huge problem for that. And the company can go bankrupt. Good luck with you having access to all the data again. So like I said, I will never use a cloud system personally for any such services.
Thanks,
Rashid.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead. No, and so the other aspect that I also wanted to say is that most of these tools that we are actually talking about are also peer reviewed. They're also used by organizations that work on extremely sensitive data, according to governments or according to any other organization that is looking to compromise or censor them because they are too, dangerous or harmful. So all of these tools that we are going to be discussing, especially I'm going to now share my screen. Are also like they have a really good track record of being able to share your data securely and keeping it safe. So here I go. Can you see my screen, John?
Yes, we do.
Okay, perfect. So yes, this is the latest version. I think when we had the training with John, we used a slightly older version, and just a couple of days back they came with the new version. So there might be a few interface changes. But this is the screen. It's really easy to access. It's very easy to download. As John mentioned earlier, always try downloading it from the website rather than using other third-party sources, because what typically happens, and this is something that I'm going to discuss with Siphon as well, is that you have a lot of proxies and a lot of different, they might be same, but they might have a little variation with words, and then your data could go in the wrong hands. So I'm going to go ahead and create a database. So ideally, you can create as many databases as you want. But ideally, I mean, for your own memory, it might be nice to have one might suffice to be able to hold the different 30 or 40 digital identities. I probably have a lot more because I take a lot of courses. I also work with communities, so I have GitHub. I'm on all social medias because my primary job is to always have partnerships. So I have those. I also have a Spotify account. So yeah, I mean, quite a few. I have a few different bank accounts. So yeah, just to give you a rough example. So here I go ahead and create my database where I put in an information. So I just call it access and Rashi. I can even give a description of what this has. So I can say that this has my information. This has my information related to the Access project. So with that, I have created my database. Over here, we also have the flexibility of increasing the encryption, and that also significantly increases the time. One of the things that we've also seen is that I think everyone's patience is coming down with all of the information that's available. So you have the flexibility. You can use the recommended version here that they've mentioned, but you can also increase the complexity with which they would take time to break the encryption or to be able to guess your password. So yeah, the longer the time it takes, the more it would take for you to be able to open this up. So that kind of flexibility is there, which is actually amazing. But I'm going to go with the recommended settings. You can also go to advanced settings and change it and play around with what you want to do. Every one of them has been selected and been created by some great cryptographers. So we're going to go with the recommended versions for this for the time being. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to continue. And I'm going to go ahead. So yeah, now I have passwords. So as I mentioned, please, I'm going to go visuals. Please don't enter any of this. Don't have this. Also, please don't. I know a lot of Indian banks have passwords that usually have the first 4 syllables of your name along with your date of birth. Please don't have your date of birth. Those are so easy to crack. And one of the great things about KeePass is that you can generate passwords at a whim, and they're very random. You can use as many characters as you want. You can customize it based on your whims and fancies. But yeah, you also need to be mindful of the platform that you're using the password for. So there's some sort of a homework that you will perhaps have to do, because some of them might be very fixed and say, hey, we only have 15 characters or we only have 20 characters, and you can actually do that here. So you can increase the length to John, 32, right, is something that we use. So I'm going to go with 32 characters.
32 characters is definitely.
Yeah, 32 characters. You can go with lowercase and uppercase. You can even extend your ASCII and go ahead, and you can also go to advanced. And I think this is a situation that I would say where a lot of people get confused, because I did mention and yeah, some of the 4 points and the flexibility is that you don't have to remember these passwords. You don't have to type them. In some cases, you might have to type them based on the platform. But yeah, you can also introduce variations. And sometimes what happens is that if you are directly copy pasting, and this is a pain in the ass for me and John as well, and this is something that John also explained properly, is that when you use a larger version of I, it can be confused as L, or you want to have large O or smaller O's. I mean, these are really confusing. So you can also customize and type these out that you don't want them. You can also mention the lower cases, so you completely remove them. And you can pick characters from every group as well. So you can pick some characters from here, from some here. Especially, I think in the Indian context, a lot of these characters, like the and the ampersand, all of them are regularly used, and that's something that they also encourage. So they call them special characters. And then, of course, you have commas. Also, the other thing is, please don't use spaces, because spaces is also considered as a character. Like, for example, I come here and this would be a space. So there's a lot of possibility to go wrong. So I wouldn't suggest that you do that. And since this is the master password for getting into the database, you can also use words. So you can generate random words and you can keep refreshing it. You can also determine the count. You can have 20 words, 30 words. So I'm going to go with 7. So yeah, I have a random word that I'm using that I also have an option to copy. And I can also have whatever word separator that I want, whether it has to be uppercase or whether it has to be lowercase. So I'm just going to go ahead with the default settings that are available. So I'm going to go ahead with this. And this is, first, since it's a master password, this is not something that will be stored inside the database. This is something that you should be able to remember. I'm not sure if that's something I would recommend for you to write down on a digital place, but maybe you can. I mean, writing down in the paper, I would still not consider that, or it's something that you know that you only have access to, and that's not something that is visible anywhere around your physical environment. But yeah, I mean, John, what do you do? How would you navigate through this? Just to make
I was typing right now on the chat that never store it in a piece of paper unless you have a vault. Mm-hmm. A physical vault, which in turn will require to have a combination or a key somewhere that you also have to protect somewhere. So as you can see, what I'm trying to say is that it's a chicken and egg situation. There's never going to be a perfect solution. So one of the good things that KeePassXC implemented is what you're showing there, the passphrase. Instead of using a very complex string of characters, what you use is a list of randomly generated words. And so those are easy for you to remember a little bit better, and although not necessarily straightforward. And you can actually try to even camouflage them somewhere. So you could possibly try to have a physical copy if you want about them, and create a sentence with it, and pretend that it's in an essay that you're keeping somewhere. And so forth. I mean, there are different ways to do it. You can also use secure communication channels such as Telegram or other places where you're storing that kind of information. You could keep it in files that are inconspicuous and so forth. So there's way to keep the information. Personally, I use a combination between, I'm not going to say exactly what I'm using, never reveal that, but I use a combination of factors. So that if someone gets to have my password, that's not enough to decrypt my personal database. And I would definitely recommend this kind of approaches. With 2 or 3 components, you can pretty much secure them separately, and good luck for someone to actually be able to figure out all of them. Yeah,
that's good. Thanks, John. So yeah, I'm going to go back to characters that you want to exclude so that it can be easily misunderstood, because you can try to make passwords that are easier to read, but in certain circumstances, the user interfaces are very poorly designed, and it it might not be that easy to type. Like, for example, if you're paying a particular bill, and most of the, like, especially when you're doing payments, especially with COVID, since everything's kind of gone online and everything's so digital, I think it's really, really important to be able to have this in handy so that it doesn't become chaotic for you. So yeah, one of the superpowers of this is to be able to essentially store all your information in one source. And you can, pay your bill easily. Also, it is very hard to simulate randomness. Like, with the randomness with which it is creating, it is difficult. I'm not sure. I mean, I wouldn't say it's impossible. I think there are a lot of possibilities. But these passwords are generated at absolute random. So I'm going to go ahead. You can also add an additional protection, which I'm not going to get into. Please book us for office hours, and I know I want to be mindful because I still have 2 or 3 more tools. So I'm going to go with done, and I'm also going to go ahead and copy this so that I remember it, and yes, go done. So that way you have successfully created, and yeah, like, you can store this in a place. I would not recommend the desktop. Please do not store it at the desktop, but for the purposes of the class that we had, I'm going to open a folder, and anyone who has a slight idea of the cybersecurity space would know that this is a password document. So again, highly recommended to store it in places where you would be keeping files that you don't want people to access. So I have managed to open it up. I have opened this up, when it also talks about the source where I have it. And typically, when you wanna save usernames and password and associated piece of information, you have to open an entry. You can press here, you can press here, or you can even press here. So I'm gonna go ahead and create an entry. You can have a title. For example, I want to. This is my details for GitHub, and yeah, some particular XYZ repository. So how do I have username? I can just have something that I usually use. This is something I use on Twitter and Instagram. And again, for my password, I can go ahead and just create anything that I want. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep it to these. I'm going to go ahead. So yeah, this is something that's really complicated and something that I don't think anyone can remember. But the good thing is that you don't need to remember this. I'm going to go ahead, copy this, go back, and the URL is something that John just. If it's fine, I think this is how you
that works. That works. Yeah.
You can also have an expiry date, but you can mention that this password is active at this particular time. So, for example, I'm going to change it to 24th and at 12:39. I can also have like different notes that I want to mention that this is what I need to do, or this is the instructions that I go here, and this is. I mean, you can trace it down whatever way you want. You can also add icons if you want to kind of really get very dressy and very fancy. That's amazing. I think it gives a room to play around with things and keep you occupied. And advanced versions can also have attachments. John had a really good discussion around how you can hide especially when you're giving credit card payments, you can hide the last, the three numbers that are always at the back of your credit card, which is CVV. So you can go ahead and take photographs of your card, and that way you remember and nobody else would need to have access to it. And you can add a sticker, or you can cover it by a black marker. So these are, I think, great aspects when it comes to attachments. I can just show you one. John, go ahead if you want to add something to that.
So the trick there, just in case, because we did a demo the first day, and that was probably much clearer. So what the additional attributes allow you to do is to create custom information. Such, for instance, the traditional security questions that you're asked when you register with the banking system or with any other platform, and you have to put your username, your password, and then they basically waste your time by asking you, give me the name of your first pet and who was your first teacher and which city you were born on, etc., etc. That probably was very well intentioned at the very beginning, but it has become an absolute liability. Because by social engineering, I can, and specifically with all the social media information that people are posting online, it's very, very easy or not necessarily complex to figure out the answer to those questions. In virtue of that, you're going to be exposing and putting that person at risk. What I do is I use the same password generator that I use for the password to generate the answers to those questions. So I keep track about the question itself. I create a new attribute that is, say, for instance, security question number 1. And I type the actual question inside that attribute. And then I would type another custom attribute called security question 1 answer. And I would keep the information of that, of another 32, at least 32 long characters password that I start there. So my password is random. The answer to each of one of those questions is also random. No one can figure it out. And really, it just costs you a couple of steps more to generate those passwords, because when it comes to actually use them, it's copy paste anyway. So really, the complexity will not be a problem for you to transpose whatever you have chosen as the answer to those questions. So that's already one case scenario for the additional attributes. Another one is something that I recommend all of you to keep in mind and to try at least once. When you are given a credit card or a debit card, typically you have on the bottom part, there's three digits called the CVC or CCV. There's different ways to call it. They drive me crazy with their different nomenclatures. That code is critical if you want to impersonate someone or to use somebody else's credit card information online, for instance. And so if someone can see the front of your card, they will have access to your name, they will have access to the credit card number, but also to the expiry date. Those are the 3 out of 4 pieces of data that you require in order to be able to do an online purchase. The fourth one is that those 3 digits that are on the back. Now, more often than not, you're going to go to a restaurant and you're going to hand over your card for the payment to be done by the counter, and you will not be there. Seriously, getting a copy of your card just takes about a couple of snapshots with their mobile phones. Whoever has bad intentions, it's very easy to actually do that. And in fact, there was a guy not long ago in China who was basically caught because what he was doing, he had a eidetic memory. So he was able to remember that information just flashing at the card. So he was working in a restaurant. He was given the cards to do the payments, would look at the face, would look at the back, then go back home, write down the number, start shopping online. So how do you avoid that? You cannot scratch the information that is in the front because it identifies you. Anyone who's going to be asking to verify that that is your card requires your ID. So your name has to be there. They also need to see what's going to be the expiry date. And of course, they need to have the name of the card. That's a given. But they don't need the code in the back. That's only for online purchases. So what you can do is you can snap yourself a picture of that back. Save that picture on the attachments, as you can see here. And also type the number as part of an attribute. And then scratch that number on your card. Make it impossible for, if the card ever falls into somebody's hand, they cannot read that number. Okay?
And another option that you can also do is to protect it.
Exactly. So you put I don't have any attribute in my personal database that doesn't get the protected setting on. Because what it avoids is that if anyone flashes in front of your computer, they can't see the value. It's encrypted. It's masqueraded in front of your screen. And of course, when you do your copy paste, this is something that I really don't understand from some websites. That particular 3D code, the CVC, should never be in plain text. And some websites implement it properly. That's great. Some others don't. Most don't. And so you're copy pasting, and all of a sudden your CVC is just there for everybody to see. I really don't understand what the hell with that. But that's the way to do it. And definitely the additional attributes is a great feature that you should use more often than not.
Absolutely. Also, the one more thing, a lot of them have a habit of also signing on. There's always this strip on the back where where companies expect you to sign. Please don't sign that. that's also not a way. So I think the other additional attributes that you can also have is you can save all your security questions, like what is the name of your first toy, or what is the name of your dog, or what is the name of what is your middle name, or what is the middle name of an XYZ relative. But yeah, another additional feature is that you would be able to protect it, and you can also add a file to it. So I'm going to go and okay this. And now I have, my details of GitHub, and that way you can add multiple entries. You can have an entry to Twitter, and you have my name, and you also generate a password. I'm going to go with passphrase this time just to play around a bit, and I can have notes and say that these are my Twitter credentials. I don't have to have an expiry date, or I do. I go with HTTPS and I go twitter.com. I say okay. So yeah, this is how we would typically make entries. So yeah, it's very easy, very accessible, very secure, and we would be sharing ways on how, we also encourage everyone to book us for office hours if you all want more information, because we're running out of time and we're running really short of time. Because I don't think I have time to go ahead with groups, but this covers with the end of KeepUs. Does anyone have any questions? John, I do see the conversation notification, so I'm just wondering, does anyone have any specific questions regarding this, so I can just move on to Siphon?
Please remember that if you have any other further questions, you can also book the office hours. That's going to be one of the things. And after this session, we'll still be hanging out on the lounge for another 30 minutes. We have our own tables there. So if you ever want to get any other extra information, you can reach out to us.
Great. Thanks. John, can you go back to Siphon? I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and then the demo is not going to take very long. So we did speak about how you can protect your digital credentials. And yes, as we mentioned, we are trying different ways of getting feedback to improve it, because there's always room to improve it. And one of the important aspects is to also check the usability and ease of access and everything of that. So now we're going to go back to Siphon, which is one of the, it's a VPN, a virtual private network, where it's basically how this particular network works on your behalf and is the entry point between two different endpoints of communication. It's used by human rights defenders from all across the world. We have millions and millions of users, so they do have networks all across the world. There are a lot of journalists that depend on them. It's good, reliable, and it's a dependable platform to bring information to the right people, and sometimes information that is not accessible to you. There are a lot of websites in India that are censored, for example. So it secures your browsing. It's very detailed, and it's also important to have a certain amount of trust between you and the VPN provider, because there are a lot of VPNs, and there's like an abundant sources of VPNs which are free. And Siphon also actually had something very interesting. There were a lot of Siphon clones when you went to your app listings or browser listings, depending on where you go, where they had the same images, and they roughly had like the same information. They just jumbled it up all around, which is why I would definitely recommend that you download Siphon directly from the website. We can mention it here as well if you don't use it. And one of the other aspect is also that you should investigate their track record. Since this is typically used by a lot of human rights and digital rights defenders across the world, you also need to understand whether they would crumble under pressure to give your information to the government or give it to resources that want to use it. But the good aspect is that there's no information to really give, because how is Siphon designed? Siphon is designed in a way that does not that doesn't require your any personal identifiable information, email, number, or any digital breadcrumbs that are required. It's very simple. It's almost like a switch. It's very well designed, and you can it's like magic literally. So you can browse at your whim. So that's something that's really cool about Siphon. Siphon is also free from what I understand. I don't believe they have premium accounts. And we also had Keith early on to discuss this with us. So yes, you have to establish a level of trust between them. Not all of them are trustworthy. I think John you'd mentioned a what was that? It was bought by Facebook. There was a VPN that you had discussed.
Yes, so there was this VPN. I can't remember the name right now. I can find it that Facebook bought. So what a VPN does is it's kind of a middle person that masquerades your communications with whichever is the destiny of or the source of the information that you're trying to access. And so you need to trust that middleman, because they will be connecting to the information that you're going to request on your behalf, and they will be pretending, quote unquote, that they are them who are requesting for the information, and then forward it back to you without no one really knowing. Now, of course, who knows who has requested and what was requested? Well, the middleman. To all effects, the endpoint that stores the data that you are storing interacts with your VPN provider and doesn't know about you as a final user. However, the middleman, the VPN provider, does know about you, because that's exactly how they know how to forward the information back to you. And so what Facebook did was to acquire a VPN service, never say that it was acquired. I mean, possibly they are legally compelled to do so, but they probably did it in a very, very quiet manner. And what they did was basically capture all the habits and all the data that users were using to keep profiling those people, until it became a big scandal and they had to get rid of it. They actually had to shut the company. I can try to find the name right now. But it was I would qualify it to be a disgusting practice, honestly, because it was very, very, what's the English? It was very deceptive. People thought they were going to be protected all the way. And a good VPN provider will not keep track of your request. It will just function as a middleware, as a middle person.
Yeah, precisely. So yeah, and also certain information is weaponizable. I mean, if you do have people who say that you have nothing to hide, they really don't know, they're really not that conscious of information that can be detrimental to you, and it can be some personal information, personal activities, or official information, something that you've been working on and that's leaked to a competitor. There's a competitor that has malicious intent. So yeah, I think VPN would be acting on your behalf, and since it has the reach and the penetration, it is required to be present across the world, and it's process intensive. But the good thing is that you don't have to worry about all of that. It's been optimized. You don't have to worry about any settings. It's designed and implemented in a way, and more importantly, it's very simple to use, so which is what makes it so popular and so well known across the world. So yeah, I think I could go ahead with, and yeah, one important other thing is that the real advantage of PSP, and this is something that even Jonathan had mentioned, I think last time, no, Keith, pardon me, was that it's designed for censorship circumvention. And many countries where you have a lot of oppressive governments, would be Iran, China, Myanmar, Russia. It's extremely sophisticated because it can identify and classify fingerprints and also lead to obfuscation of traffic. So yeah, it has a great value. So yeah, as I was saying, it's also an example of a platform that is very, very well peer reviewed. All of the data regarding the the review and the analysis and the insights are also available. Where it's very transparent, so that's amazing. It doesn't require a credit card, phone number, email ID. There's no data that actually comes into their possession, so they don't have any data on any users. So yeah, they have nothing to hand over to anyone else. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead, and I think also I didn't mention this last time, but yeah, KeepUs. You can get in touch with the folks on KeepUs on GitHub, but Siphon actually has a feedback form. They receive typically all of these tools, given that there are so many of us and so many users, they get thousands, and I think Siphon gets one review per minute. So yeah, one has to be kind of pretty mindful even when it comes to giving the feedback that they want, because at the end of the day, these are smaller teams and people who actually look at it, but they do read each and every review, and they might take a little time to get back, but they will get back. So John, I'm going to move ahead with the demo. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, this is what Siphon is. It's pretty simple, and I just need to click connect, and by default, it has been able to set the ideally the server that, and of course, this also determines at what speed you want to connect on. It's always good to be able to have a server that is within your country or near your country, rather than, for example, if I'm in India, I'd like the server to be in India, not in the US or Germany. I mean, it does take a little more time, and sometimes those few seconds that do pile on, it can be challenging. We're all impatient human beings. We all want everything in a jiffy. So it's good to leave it at best performance. So Siphon does all the magic that it needs, and the screens and all of that. It's also available in a lot of different languages, so we can have a look. And there's a lot of, they do frequently collaborate with organizations across the world to be able to translate it in languages that you want to leave it down. So I do see a lot of Indian languages. I do not see Malay, or I don't. Do we see? Yeah, but I think there is a future. Maybe tomorrow we would be instrumental in helping translate it into more languages, so that we can have more users across the world. Going back, so right now we're disconnected. I also have the ability to connect it to different parts of the world, as you can see here. But I'm gonna keep this as the default. And how do I know that I'm connected? So yeah, that's how I know I'm connected. So it does tell me that Siphon is connected, and this green mark is enough for me to be able to know that I am connected to Siphon. There is no other way really. And now I can continue and resume with my secure browsing. There is nothing really. And yeah, so it's literally like a switch. I can disconnect it by clicking on this, and I can connect it with whatever I have to really do. So yeah, one of the advantages perhaps is also that some content that would be available to a particular IP address, for example, on YouTube, if you have content available to a certain geography, it is possible that you could, and because of copyright issues, it would be available there, and that's something that you could view with Siphon. And also, when they were allocating IP addresses, and I didn't go into detail, but IP addresses is any unique identifier that's given to any device that you possess, and there are certain numeric values that are given to a particular geographic region, and with the user base increasing, you have a lot more IP addresses, and many a times you can also figure out which geographic region the user belongs to based on the IP address. So those are the kind of securities that Siphon would provide. And I'm not going to get into all of the settings, but some of the settings that I could get into is while I'm browsing is that there are a lot of you can always we don't have to proxy websites within your country because, for example, there are a lot of payment gateways and a lot of things that are localized to India, and if I am browsing to a different country, that's something that might not be available to me, and that's not something that I could be able to access. So that way I can browse as someone from, say, I'm just gonna say change it to Germany, or yeah, I go to Austria. That way I will still be able to be seen as someone who is browsing from India, uh, and to everyone else, I'm someone who's browsing from Austria. And is there anything else? Yeah, you have different server regions. And I don't think there's anything else that I perhaps want to talk about. John, maybe you want to add something? Otherwise, I think that's about it. There's nothing else really.
Yeah, Siphon is just that simple, and in fact is what you want. You don't want something that is way more complicated than a simple switch, by no means.
Exactly. Someone did mention that there's a paid version for full bandwidth, but I think yeah, the conversation that we had with users was that it was freely available. And I mean, if that's something that you want to explore, whoever asked that question, I'm happy to look into it and provide that, because that's something. I mean, if you do attend the training, we do have some perks. So I think we would be getting some premium versions available for all the people who've taken the pain and attended and finished all our homework. So we are happy to have that conversation post this. Yeah, and maybe
sorry. On top of that, we also have some codes for another provider, TunnelBear. So if any of you is going to be in a situation where, so two things. If any of you is going to be in a situation where you're going to be needing a VPN anytime soon for reasons that are pretty much justified, you can reach out to us, and we do have some codes for TunnelBear, aside from the fact that you can use Siphon. But it depends on what's going to be the circumstances. Maybe you prefer to use another provider. And if you are also involved in a situation where a group of people may require to not depend on the third providers, just Siphon or TunnelBear or Proton VPN or any of the commercial ones, and they would like to run their own server. We think about the Myanmar situation, or even the one in Colombia recently. We have the capacity to provide you with your own server. You just have to reach out to us, and we will do the necessary to give you a hand with that.
Yeah, we did do that for a few journalists and activists on ground for folks in Colombia recently. So happy to have that chat as well. And I just wanted to also show the feedback. It's really simple, and it's just a different tab where you can provide your feedback, you can provide your comments. They also have an email ID, so yeah, they've really made it very easy and customize it with whatever you want. So I think they did really great, and we would highly recommend this. And I think we could move on to the next one. John, do we want to take a break for 5 minutes and then get back, or do we just continue?
I think we can just finish, because we got basically 25, 30 minutes more. I will just go into it at once.
Okay. Can go ahead with that. So yeah, I'm done with I'm done with Siphon. And if there's does anyone have any questions at all with this? I don't see any questions. So maybe we can move on to Briar. John, if you can share on your screen.
I need you to stop sharing first.
I think
I can do it. Okay.
Done. Yeah. I'm gonna rush a bit. We don't have any time at all, actually. Yeah, I'm gonna rush a bit with Bio.
And so we move forward, no feedback anymore, and Briar. There we go.
So Briar is a free and open instant messaging app primarily for activists and journalists, because it has a lot of ability to kind of broadcast messages, and you can broadcast messages to particular people and customize it really well. It doesn't rely on a central server, and it offers peer-to-peer encryption. The messages are, of course, E2B encrypted, and it's designed for anyone that needs a safe and easy and robust way to communicate. One of the highlights is that it doesn't rely on the internet. You can sync via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi and keep the information flowing in a crisis. It's also important for anyone who's in perhaps hostage situation or dire situation in conflict zones, which is a reality, unfortunately, for a lot of people. Briar can sync via the Tor network if the internet is up, protecting users and their relationship from surveillance. Briar is only found on Android, although we did have plans of opening it up on Apple when we had Michael in the last session. Briar, so they do have plans, but then in terms of the speed, because the more complex the encryption has, the more time it takes, which I'm pretty sure is really hard to design apps that protect your information and at the same time, also need to perform immediately. That is a challenge. So it also means that there's no server that's actually storing your messages. All information is stored in your device and devices of the contacts that you have been communicated with. It's completely decentralized, completely private. So yeah, and the ways that you can connect to it without the internet is Bluetooth, but of course with Bluetooth you need to be at a certain distance. Wi-Fi, it has a higher, we would say, reach, and of course the internet via the Tor project. So it works really well in low bandwidths and poor connectivity in places that have 2G or 3G. From the Indian context, they're anywhere with in terrains which don't have good infrastructure, and in places which have perennially with internet shutdowns like Kashmir or the whole northeastern state, or even many parts of rural India actually. So yeah, it supports messaging and emojis only, but actually just yesterday I did see that Briar actually now even supports images, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say that it was a very recent update.
For those who
go ahead.
Sorry, there was I didn't want to cut you. For those who may think that transmitting images may not be an impressive feat for these guys, once you understand how Briar functions, you will realize that it's actually amazing that they have managed to get images done. There's a number of restrictions because of the way they try to keep the communication secure, and being able to handle the huge size that an image can end up having. It's quite an achievement. I'm actually very happy that they're able.
Yeah, absolutely. John, remember there was also a question last time that someone asked if there were disappearing messages. So they have disappearing messages now, and they also have image attachments, profile images, and disappearing messages. So that's, I think, absolutely great. It's a really good way forward, because just till last month they only had messaging and emojis, and there were a lot of people in the audience who had questions about why it would just make it a lot better to have disappearing messaging. So that's great. It's a big win for them, really. Yeah, as you mentioned, it's ideal for anyone who is looking for community builders, journalists, and digital right defenders. It also has an option of a panic button. And apart from private messaging one-on-one, it also allows private groups, forums, and blogs that can be viewed by your contacts. So I could go in a little bit into that, unless John, you have something to add. I can go a little bit on how it works, and I can show them the interface.
Yep, all good.
All good. Do you want to explain a bit on the technical aspects? I don't think we have time.
I can have a go at it from a very, very simple way. So the difference between Briar and other systems that you might be used to is essentially the fact that they are looking at it from a point-to-point perspective. So what does this mean? It means that there's no servers involved into the communication, and that the whole communication between the devices let me restart. And also let me put my camera on, because I realized that I'm not here. I'm gesticulating in the air, no one's looking at me. So in a normal circumstance, you would have a scenario such as this, where in order for the communication to happen, the information has to go through a server. And so the communication has to be properly encrypted between each of one of the endpoints and the server. That's not always the case. And depending on whether the server can be malicious or not, there's a number of other case scenarios where you basically can get your information stolen and your messages intercepted. There is, however, one concept that people tend to forget when it comes to security, and this is not a futile exercise. Information is contextual, which means if someone steals information of yours from 5 years ago, it might not be valid anymore. Say, for instance, that I exchanged with Rashi 5 years ago the PIN number of my credit card, and someone manages to decrypt that information 5 years later. Very likely that credit card doesn't exist anymore, and the PIN number has already been changed. All right? So when you look at how important certain information it is that it is stolen or not, look at it from a whole holistic concept. It's not only the data itself, but how really applicable that information is nowadays, on a given context. Now, again, let's say someone steals my keys when I'm backpacking in Mongolia. What are the chances that this person in Mongolia who has stolen my keys and my phone and other elements will come and find me in Malaysia and be able to go and steal my stuff in my Malaysian house? So having a piece of information does not require that they're going to be able to harm you with it. They may require more information, more resources, more context. Okay, so don't always be overly paranoid about it. Try to have a general system of protection so that not everything falls into the wrong hands, but just don't be too paranoid about it. And seriously, the best solution here is if anything falls into the wrong hands, just change those passwords, consider the lost information as lost, move on. Now, enter, of course, in, how's the English? In, there's an expression for this. Damage control mode for as long as you need to be able to mitigate as much as the damage as possible, and then move on. All right, so what does Briar do? Briar takes it differently. Briar sends the communication directly phone to phone. So I'm not sure I actually made my point here. I'm going to take two cases of communications here with two very famous platforms, WhatsApp and Telegram. Both WhatsApp and Telegram send the data through their servers. Okay, when Telegram or WhatsApp tells you that they are sending device to device, the information is still going through somebody else's server, even if it's not theirs. All right. In the case of Briar, the communication only happens between the two devices that are involved. And so there's no middleman. And that happens because they must be at reach of each other. There is no network involved aside from the network that they create themselves by being at reach of their own antennas. You absolutely remove the middleman there. Okay, you can also use it through through a middleman if you require. As you can see here in the image, you can use a Wi-Fi, so you can connect through the internet. You can use Tor. Tor is another anonymity network. That is possible, but it's not necessary. That's the power of Briar. And therefore, if you are in a circumstance where you have a natural disaster where telecommunications had done, or internet shutdowns have been happening in a specific area, for as long as you are at a distance between two devices that can still receive information from each other because the antennas are are powerful enough, you can still communicate. And so you can imagine how powerful this could be in a flooding. You can't cross the road, but you can still communicate with your loved ones on the other side of the road. Or there's a conflict area, and they're shooting in the middle of the street, and you're telling your neighbors, don't go down. Okay, those are possible. And so Briar goes one step beyond. Not only it allows you to do this kind of peer-to-peer communications, it also allows you to act as a relay yourself. So let's say, for instance, in this map that person A on the left wants to send a message to person E. Okay, you can relay the data to B and then goes to C. They are in one specific, if you will, physical enclosures, and they're in a situation where A, B, C, and D can talk to each other because they are close enough, near enough from one another. Now C moves to the other side of the city and comes into reach of E. E can now receive the information that was sent by A originally. And all of that is transparently implemented by Briar. You don't have to worry about it. You just send a message to whoever is going to be your destination, you let it go. You don't necessarily have the reassurance that it's going to be reaching out that person, because obviously you don't know if C is going to be getting there, but you still have the ability to at least try. And if you have as well some information that you require from the internet, one of those relays can also pass you the information if they ever get back to you. So that's a quite powerful set of features, and this is why I was saying that being able to transmit images is kind of a feat, because it doesn't rely on high bandwidth that you may have with the internet. It relies with the bandwidth that you have between your devices and the storage that you have in your devices. And so you can start, descaling all the power that you have when you connect with your own internet service provider to just have a very, very basic type of service with your phones. Your phones can be very sophisticated and they can have a lot of speed, and sure, but it's not always the case. And specifically in places where in remote areas, not everyone has the latest flagship from the biggest brands. So they have much more modest mobile phones, which is one of the target markets for Briar. So it's really a cool thing that these guys have succeeded. Back to you, Rashi.
Thanks, John. So yeah, I'm just gonna quickly go into the demo a bit. So yeah, John, I'm gonna share my screen, so we'll need you to stop presenting. Thanks. Thank you. So hang on. And I think you can see my screen. So yeah, as I did mention that we just mentioned on how it works. You have the team, and yes, you can also keep it downloaded. I'm just gonna go a little through the manual. They also have a different section for questions, so you can also, and yeah, there's also a way to reach out to them. You can also see on my right-hand side that they have a lot of translations and how they use mobile data, how they connect by the internet and screen locking and all of that. So yeah, it's only found, as I mentioned, on Google Play. It also have instructions for people who use F-Droid or direct download. So this is how you create an account. Just gonna set up screen. It's encrypted, and again, all of the as John mentioned, the data that is stored, it's stored on your device. So there's a possibility that if you forget the password for this, there's no way to recover it, and this is another cue of why you should have KeePassX, so that you won't forget your password and you don't have to create another account. And yes, well, this would be again very dependent on the memory that your phone has. I have terrible memory, so this is, yeah, I'll need to have space for it. I have used Briar on a few occasions when I've done field work, but yes, going back to that, you can also add contacts. where you have to tap the icon at the bottom of the right contact list, which you can see here, and you can also add contacts nearby that are physically near you. So you need to establish a connection by sending the links. So this is the link of the contact that you want to add, and you enter the link from your contact here, and the contact that you add will have a pending contact request. I'm sorry for rushing with this, but we don't have really a lot of time. We have pending contact list where you can get the status of each contact, and if you're able to, there is a certain time, and if you go beyond 48 hours, then you have to reestablish this, and that way you have you've been able to get a contact. And of course, if you have a contact nearby and if you're in the same room, the magic of QR codes would come into play here. But yeah, you must meet up with the person you want to add as a contact, because it will prevent anyone from impersonating you or reading your messages in the future. And that's so rampant now, so it's so important. So going to rush a bit here. Messaging, just as any regular messaging platform, it's end-to-end encrypted, so no one else can really need them. You can have a name. You can also introduce contacts, where you can introduce them through Briar, and you can make an introduction. And you can also have a label of what the subject you want to be, and of course everyone has to consent, so they always have an accept option, unlike a lot of other platforms. So there's also option of private groups, where you can have the list is a little open. You can create a name for the group. You can also choose the contacts that you would like to invite and have an additional invitation, and the new groups will be added, and it also shows all the groups that you belong to, and messages in the private groups are organized in threads. And the creator of the group is the only one who can invite new members, nobody else. So there's no admin system as such. So any member can leave, and over here, unlike on WhatsApp or Telegram, if the creator leaves, the group is dissolved here. So this is something like really more intimate. But you can have if you want to have other members that can also invite members, I think forum is better. So you have, which is more like a public conversation. Anyone can join and invite their own contacts. You can choose a name. You can also be added to a forum list. Like you can check a name here, and you can also have an option to choose your contacts and then share forum. Messages in the forums are again organized in a thread format. So it's more like, I would say, more like Twitter. I mean, yeah, it has a good resemblance with Twitter, if you use Twitter. And any member of the forum can invite new members and create them. And I think, yeah, it also has an option of retweeting. I think that's there here. Yeah, so you can, but that's with blogs. So it has a built-in blog, which is why I said that it makes sense for anyone who's looking at disseminating information. So which is why for journalists, this is a delight. You can post news and updates about your life. It's automatically shared with your contacts. When I say contacts, I mean the contacts that you have established here, not with your contact list. So to read your contacts or write a post, you can just choose blogs and write what you have to. It will appear on the feed. There's an option to reblog, which is why I said it's very similar to retweeting. The reblog comment would appear in your feed. And yeah, I think, sorry for rushing with this, but if you have any questions, please book us. And I really don't have much time. But yeah, I'm going to hand it over to you, John. Anything else? But yeah, I think I'm going to take a minute to get back to the feedback option. John, maybe you want to share your screen? So yeah, we did a demo, and with the feedback, we were actually thinking of doing a combination of things. We were thinking, one is that, of course, you have the option of reaching out to us, but we were also looking at designing a survey along with having a few group discussions with smaller groups to be able to understand what are the ways that you can meaningfully contribute, because we kind of want to make it very participatory and interactive. We've also seen some new faces, and if you are interested in joining the group, you can also sign up for it, because I do see some new faces joined in. You can also sign up so that you can get updates on when we have these discussions. We would be using those designated office hours to hold these small discussions for us to be able to give meaningful feedback. So yeah, group discussions and surveys, and that's something that we would be designing over the coming days and share it with everyone who signed up for this program. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, John.
All right, so we are pretty much done. We are actually on the verge of finishing the session, so we're going to be already going into the details for the next phase. Let me again, I missed the.
I just realized that we've not covered UNI, but we can cover for anyone who wants a recap of UNI. You can use the office hours, and I will share the link with you all shortly.
Yeah. So we're going to be moving directly into the feedback part. So we're going to be reaching out to you guys, and also for the people who have participated before. We will be organizing some sessions for the collection of the feedback. We would like you to start using the applications that you've been looking into today. I forgot, by the way, to provide you the Briar project, the official website for Briar, since we've done the same for all the others. This is the list that we can do. Briar official website. There you go. We encourage you to test the products, to test the platforms, and we will be reaching out to you in the coming few days and try to get some feedback of yours. And we can assure you that that feedback will go to the development teams. We are in touch with them, and in fact, they will probably going to be joining us in the coming months for TechUp in terms of not only providing all the training sessions, but also on day 2, where we do the first project sprints, and we will be able to provide, as I said, that information back to the developers, and we will work with them so that the suggestions that you provide actually get to be materialized. Rashi, you want to explain a little bit more about how that's going to be happening?
Yeah, we would be sending out surveys to you, and then we would also have a few activities related to the conversation that we have, because the surveys would cover one aspect of it. We want to get really contextual because we want to really give meaningful feedback. So we would be doing a combination of both. So we would be reaching out to people who've been present at our sessions. I'm also dropping in the chat. As I said, we saw a few new faces. So, if you wanna be a part of this, or if you know people who actively use these tools who would like to give us feedback, please sign up. I mean, it's more of just a formality, and we do send out periodic emails. So you will get to know what the status is of this particular aspect. And yeah, we would be sending you a survey followed by a few discussions.
I'm also typing on the chat the link for the office hours. It's there in the screen. However, it might be TIOF office hour access. There you go. If you click on it, you will see that there's a calendar to be able to reserve some of the hours. I can see that they are not right now showing up, so I'm going to be double verifying that. And Rashi will be in touch with you for the next step for the feedback part.
Absolutely.
Now, one last thing, and again, I realized that my camera was not, was it on? There's one last thing that I want to sort of expose before we leave, and it's one of the reasons why we do all of this. We are not the people anymore. We are the cyborgs. And if anyone believes that or feels that this might be an exaggeration, I invite you to give us your smartphone, and we can have this conversation again in 1 week time. We have absolutely become dependent of our communication devices, and it's not because they are not fusion with our body that they are not a piece of ourselves. In fact, if you remove the phone from our smartphones from our lives, we lose the capacity of communicating with a lot of people that nowadays have become essential for us. It is a piece of us. And the faster we realize that, the more we're going to be able to understand how important good technology is going to be for us. You wouldn't want to eat a piece of meal that is poison. You also don't want to be incorporating into your life a piece of technology that is going to be detrimental to you. Thanks a lot for attending today's session. If there's any question, we are more than happy to answer it right now. Otherwise, you can find us on the lounge in the coming minutes. We're going to be there for a while. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.